Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of J B Boda's Minimalist Corporate Lifestyle. I'm Aruna Howal, Head of Employee Benefits. J B Boda would be your host today. Managing talent in times of crisis invariably poses some dichotomies that are centered around unpredictability. Such events, as in the current case, start very suddenly and may also abruptly, but the ongoing adjustments and lasting impact need to be managed. On this note, let me welcome again Dr. Belwalkar, Speaker of the Day. Dr. Belwalkar needs no introduction, but to reiterate, she's the founder of Theory of Purpose. She's an adjunct faculty at NMIMS, Mumbai, and a visiting faculty across several leading business schools, including SP Jain, SDA Bocconi, Woxsen, ISB, and IIT. Her PhD was endorsed by prestigious Faith at Work, Princeton University. Dr. Shibani is leading organization culture transformation expert and leadership coach. In addition to being a speaker in the field of purpose at work, Shibani spends half of her time in Mumbai and half in Washington, D.C., where she has international office. We are truly delighted and privileged to have her here with us today. Along with Dr. Shibani, I also welcome our panelist, Ina D'Souza. Ina is currently heading the L&D and OD in employee engagement for 1,000 plus employee hospitality company called the Gustibus Hospitality Private Limited. The company has 16 restaurant outlets under various brands and employs people across the spectrum of skill, knowledge, and education. In her free time, she works as a learning and OD consultant for organization. She writes on HR-related topics for publications as well as on LinkedIn. She is in the process of setting up her own blog or vlog that will be developing deep into HR issues. So on this note, over to you, Shibani. Please note, you can raise all the questions as usual in the chat section. We will try to answer as many questions we can. The answers that we are not able to answer on this chat section, we will try and post this back to you. The recording of this webinar will be available on the YouTube. Please do visit us on YouTube. Thank you so much, and over to you, Shibani.
Thank you, Aruna, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world that you are in, joining us today for a very interesting and relevant topic, which is talent management in the post-COVID era. So let me take a quick minute to welcome all of you on from the different areas that you're in. And if you can post quickly on the chat window that we have here, where are you all logging in from? So we get an idea of what are the different perspectives we can bring in today, what are the different conversations we can raise, and where we're all coming together from. In fact, it's interesting to note that technology has progressed in an amazing fashion, and thank you to J B Boda for taking this initiative to bring us all together. This topic is even more pertinent for me today because it's come in the light of a book that we've recently collaborated on talent management. And believe you me, the amount of over-engineering sometimes that goes around the topic of talent management makes us wonder that do we really need to go back and revisit our models once and for all? Or do we need to create models that are so adaptive to change that they can welcome any unprecedented times that we can see? So on this note, let us get cracking once again. I have a question for all of you that I'd like to start off with. Can anyone tell me where the word talent originates from? And I'm watching the windows for your answers. Can anyone tell me quickly where you think the word talent originates from? I have an interesting habit of wanting to look at the etymology of words, because what happens is very often in the context of the language that we use, particularly English, we tend to move away from the actual meaning of the word and where it's originated from. So it could actually mean something else, but in the context in which we use it creates a whole different concept of the message that we're trying to deliver with that particular word. So let's see, Oxford Dictionary. All right, talent from currency. Okay, I see some more answers. Anyone else? Where does the word etymology come in from? Well, the word etymology, the word talent is actually originally from a Latin word that means talento, and essentially brings us to the idea of inclination, learning, will, desire. So it's got its roots in a Latin word which means talenta, and it's originally derived from that. But here's what I'd like to bring our attention to. It talks about a desire. It talks about a will. It talks about an inclination. It talks about the wanting to do something. So if talent all along has been our focus, with a focus on skills and competencies and the ability to perform, what about the will and the inherent desire to want to perform? In fact, what this tells us is that talent seems to be a two-pronged attribute. It has to do with our capability and our ability to deliver, but it also has to do with our willingness to want to deliver. So in short, we're talking about an individual who has will and skill. This is also the basis for Stephen Covey's work around situational leadership, that a leader needs to look at the skill and the will of his team members before he decides which kind of technique to utilize in leadership skills as well. So back to talenta, skill and will. Now here's a question that I'd want to park with all of you. That if talent actually means the skill and the will, we're talking about two very potent combinations coming together for an individual in the organizational context. Now, if an individual has both of these attributes, it makes me wonder that are we maybe focusing on not necessarily the right set of people when it comes to creating our management processes? And should we look at bringing in more and more people who can move into the range of the talented kind of profile people? Here's what I mean. A research done by Times of India a couple of years ago has said that only 3% of an organization is responsible for its results. Only 3% of an organization drives the organization's results. That essentially means that 97% is not directly responsible for driving the organization's outcomes. If that is the case, and on the other hand, we're saying that talented individuals have the ability and the desire, the will and the skill, then it looks like it's an inherent quality that will probably propel them. They have the right kind of engineering to propel them to deliver the outcome of the organization. Is it time maybe then to look at different triggers in our culture and an environment that can then convert the 97% also into this 3% bracket? And this is how our talk is going to unfold today. In fact, a discussion, and I'm very delighted to see your messages that keep coming in from the chat. Please keep your messages on. I'm looking at them time and again. Our talk today is divided into 3 elements. The first one is a deliberate attempt at re-looking at the lens of talent management. Can we move from a very outward perspective to an inward perspective? The second piece of our conversation is going to be around the landscape, the context of talent management, pre and post-COVID, the discussion's theme today. And of course, the third piece is going to be the action. What is the action we're going to take in the context of the post-COVID talent management practices we're looking at? And all of these with the theme of minimalism. In fact, thank you, Aruna and the J B Boda group again. It's a very, very powerful concept to bring on board today. Here's a quick question once again for all of you on chat. If I could see your answers, what do you think are some of the ways in which you have seen minimalism step into your life? Have you been using lesser amount of clothes, fewer amount of shoes, probably even managing with the minimum resources you have in your kitchen? Where all are you seeing minimalism crop up in your life? And it's interesting to see that we're also talking about minimalism in HR topics such as talent management. So a minute for all of you to type in your answers, and they'll keep them going. They're very interesting everywhere. Pankaj is right. He's saying minimalism everywhere. The car, I agree with you. We've not stepped into a car for a while now. Okay, all right. Everything is looking at minimum. Social engagement as well. You're right. Okay, all right. Wow, this is like a avalanche of answers, and that's amazing. It's all about participation in the webinar, and I think what we can get out of the webinar is as much of inputs that you would give, as much as I will enjoy sharing my views and my research along in this conversation. So back to our first portion of understanding the lens through which we look at talent management. If we're looking at ability and willingness, as we discussed earlier, let me share an example here where talent management has actually moved from a very outward perspective to an inward lens. OA and Nishida were 2 participants in the Berlin Olympics in 1937, Japanese sports people who had taken part in the men's pole vault event. Both of them made it to the final round. In fact, one was going to get the gold, one was going to get the bronze, and the other one was going to get the silver medal. Equally talented, both of them knew that they were in for a medal anyways. This is what they did. They went to the Olympic officials, the competition officials, and they requested the officials to say, you know, we were happy to split the bronze medal, or we're happy to split the silver medal between both of us. We don't even need a separate medal for each one of us. Just give us one common medal and we'll take it back. The competition refused. The official said, no, you have to compete and we will give you a medal. One person will get the bronze and one will get the silver. The gold had been taken by an American sports person. Oya and Nishida were not happy and they didn't let up. So they decided not to take part in the competition and said that we're both the winners. The competition officials actually went back and looked at the record that Oya had created and the record that Nishida had created, and ended up giving Nishida the silver and Oya the bronze medal. Both these sports people spoke to each other and said, we don't need an external world to determine our talent. We don't need the external world to start managing our talent. You and I both know that we're talented, and a 0.01 millimeter of a difference in the pole vault is not going to change the way you are performing, nor am I. So the two of them came back to Japan with the two medals. They fused the medals into an alloy and then created two separate medals out of them, creating separate medals called medals of friendship. Now, here's what I'd like to highlight here, that in my entire research around the lens of talent management, looking at the definition of ability and willingness, looking at this example that came from Berlin, I spent some time reflecting on what must be the true element in the environment that makes us want to look at talent management as a practice or a process for managing talent externally in our organization. That means rather than leaving it as a self-governing practice with employees who are talented, why is it that we step in to make an alteration in the way they perform their roles? Why do we sometimes over-engineer talent management? It brought me to the concept of competition. And that's when I realized that the original meaning of the word competition is competere, from the Latin word competere. And competere means to strive together. So on this note, I'd like to highlight the first message that I received during my research. And that is that competition, the ability to strive together, is a necessary element in the environment, particularly in the context of talent management. Because what we can do is when we create cultures that look at striving together, talent management becomes on autopilot. Individuals who do well and who perform well can encourage and even inspire the others in the organization to do even better. And more than that, talent management looks at competition not externally. Talent management looks at competition from within. That means how much can you compete with yourself to do better and better? So if we have to shift the lens of talent management from an external management practice that we would need to enforce on our talent in the organization, maybe as talent management professionals and also individuals who are talented, we can start thinking a little differently and shift our lens to look at how we can compete with ourselves and bring in the elements of ability and willingness and inspire the environment around us as well. Now, here's one theory I'd like to park with you, or maybe leave for you to consider. It's called the impact theory that was brought out by Tony Bellew. He said, essentially proposed that talent is a combination of two elements. And talent comes from an impact theory, which essentially means, and for some reason my screen is frozen, so just give me a minute while I unfreeze the screen so I can share it with you. All right, Aruna, quick check with you. Am I audible?
Yes, Shibani.
All right, great. Just making sure I'm audible. So he brought out an impact theory and said that human capacity is completely limitless and you can acquire any skill in any area. So if that is the case, essentially it means that if we can try and if we persevere, we will find newer and newer ways of looking at talent within ourselves. Now, being a storyteller by default, because I grew up in a country far away from here where the only source of entertainment was stories, I cannot help but bring out a little bit of a story in the context to tell you what I mean when we say talent can emerge from various ways, particularly in the face of adversity. The stories of Hirkani and Shivaji Maharaj, and for all of those who are not from Maharashtra, Shivaji Maharaj was a very well-known warrior. Hirkani used to sell sweetmeats or snacks on the fort of Raigad, which was one of the most impenetrable forts of Shivaji Maharaj. Every morning she would reach there at 6 in the morning and then sell her sweetmeats and her snacks to all the residents of the fort and then leave by 5 in the evening. One particular day when she walked up to the fort, she saw a celebration in the Queen's Palace. So she got carried away and went there. Didn't realize that it was 5 o'clock until she heard the gong ring and realized that the soldiers were going to close the gates of the fort. Now, panicking, she dropped her basket and started running to the gates of the fort and begging the soldiers to let her out. But at that point in time, in those days, the orders of the king, the orders of Shivaji Maharaj essentially meant they were cast in iron. They were drawn out on stone. So there was no question of reopening the doors, even if it meant Hirkani had to go back home. The soldiers requested her to stay back in the palace, saying, just remain there, just sleep here with some friend of yours and go across the next morning. It's okay. You have so many other women in this area. They'll gladly allow you to share their hut or in the night. So it's okay. Don't worry about that. There are lots of rooms in the palace you can wait with. Hirkani was really upset and she says, no, I cannot stay here. She begs and pleads, but the doors wouldn't open. Darkness starts falling. And eventually she starts feeling the walls of the palace, thinking about some entrance somewhere that she can find, a gap somewhere in the wall, which will allow her to get out of the palace and make her way back home. Unfortunately, she finds none. Eventually, as she's feeling the walls, she suddenly realizes that it's not just about trying to find a gap in the wall. Even if she chose to climb the wall, if she looked up, it was a 20-foot long, high wall. That was the story. The next morning, 8 a.m., when the soldiers opened the door, they saw Hirkani outside waiting with her basket of snacks to walk into the fort again. They were shocked and they asked her, saying, Hirkani, how did you get into the fort? There's obviously a traitor amongst us. Can you tell us his name? We need to figure out who's really let you out. And it's impossible to get out of Shivaji Maharaj's fort. Who is that traitor? Hirkani at that point in time is really shocked. She says, no, I climbed the wall and I made my way out. I jumped down the cliff of the fort and I went home. They said, impossible, nobody can ever do that. Shivaji Maharaj hears this commotion and he makes his way out to say, what's going on? So he looks at this young lady and he says, tell me, very respectfully and with a lot of empathy and compassion, that can you tell me what happened? She says, I needed to go home. The soldiers wouldn't let me. So I climbed the wall and I jumped over the cliff. He says, that's impossible. Can you show me where? So she takes him. Shivaji Maharaj calls for a really long ladder rope and they climb up to the top of the wall and he says, are you sure you climbed this wall? She says, yes. He says, are you sure you jumped over this cliff? Look, it's ridiculous. It's got stones, it's got boulders, it's got sharp trees. It's impossible you would have survived. Did you really do this? She said, yes. So he says, all right, what made you do this? She says, Shivaji Maharaj, there was one and only one thing that drove me in the direction of taking this risk and coming out successful out of it. And that was the cries of my baby. My baby was alone, 6-month-old baby, wailing for me in the middle of the night. I couldn't bear those cries. All I could think in front of my eyes at that point in time was my baby and how I could get to my baby quickly. And so I jumped and I reached. Purpose. Her purpose took her there. But here's what. Talent can come out from areas that you can't imagine, from perspectives and contexts you cannot even believe talent can emerge from. So let's look at COVID-19 also as an adversity, our Raigad Fort, and see how we will be able to spot talent in different nooks and crannies with our teams and employees going forward. As I mentioned earlier, our discussion is going to be based on 2 or 3 different elements, but taking ourselves to the second piece of our discussion is going to be what have been some of the larger pre-COVID themes. What has been the context pre-COVID and what do we think is going to be the context post-COVID? So I'd like to take a quick pause and allow us all to reflect on a statement which was made by Gary Hamel, a very well-known management guru, that companies today have 21st century internet-enabled businesses. You can switch off your phone and you can contact anybody anywhere, and you can do this virtual webinar with 300 people online, and it's fantastic. But 20th century management processes and 19th century principles of management. So I'd like to pause here for a minute and ask you, what are your views on this statement? What do you think about what Gary Hamel has said? All right, let me see your answers coming in. What do you think are some of the views you have on this? What do you think about all of this? Okay, and I'm going to park this thought with you because I'm going to elaborate a little bit more as we move forward. This is all those principles that we have are actually based on 19th century management principles, primarily known as scientific management. And the father of scientific management, of course, was called Frederick Taylor. Now, scientific management also has its roots in the industrial era. But from the industrial era, we've moved into the information era, and we've moved into the experience era, and we're moving to the purpose era. But unfortunately, what's happening is our scientific management principles of processes and policies and actions still continue to be brought into our newer and newer emerging eras. Now, if we were to break this concept up into 2 or 3 top areas in which scientific management impacts us, let's look at the pre-COVID landscape first, and then see what we need to do in terms of context of the post-COVID landscape. So, all right, I can see some messages coming on. That's right, Taylor and Fayol were, you're right, absolutely, you're right. Frederick Taylor and Henry Fayol were the fathers of management principles. The top 3 elements that constitute our framework of talent management are sourcing, managing, and developing. Now, if we had to look at the pre-COVID scientific management principles brought on by Frederick Taylor, as I mentioned earlier, and in a minute, I will share with you where he got the theory from. Sourcing has been very traditional, managing has been output-based, and developing has been employer-driven. Frederick Taylor was actually a foreman in a factory that was called Bethlehem Steel and Iron Works, early in the 1900s. He noticed that the workers were able to carry 7 tons of crude iron in a wheelbarrow from one place to another place that was elevated. He wanted to understand that why is it that one employee can only move 7 tons during the course of the day? So he started measuring task and motion. So task and motion studies began here. He measured task and motion studies to understand what is it that one can do or an employee can do to increase the turnover or increase the output of their effort. By studying that, he realized that one individual could actually end up moving 49 tons in the same amount of time during the day. Obviously, as a foreman, if you go down to the shop floor and you ask your workers to increase the amount that they're going to move, they're probably going to get exhausted and not do enough out of fatigue. So he followed a different pattern. He brought a set of workers as an experiment and he said, you will take a break when I ask you to take a break. You will walk certain number of steps in a certain fashion. You will move the wheelbarrow in a certain direction, and you will actually perform the task in the way I ask you to perform each task. And you know what? At the end of the first day, his experiment showed that the 5 individuals he brought in for this experiment moved 49 tons in one single day. That was a basis which is still moving today and becoming part of our current existence. Now, having kept this in the background, let's look at sourcing pre-COVID. And when we talk about very traditional, pre-COVID sourcing, of course, was our typical way of looking at resumes coming in, probably looking at references that came in, we would hire from social media and so on and so forth. Let me ask you a question over here. What have been your toughest challenges in hiring talent? What have been your biggest challenges in talent management hiring? Aruna, I request you to release our poll for us. So here's the poll coming up on your screens in like just a few seconds. If you could all give us your answers and tell us what you think has been your greatest challenge in talent management. Aruna, have you sent out?
Should I launch it?
All right. Please do. Please launch the poll.
Whilst I launch, Shibani, just have a look at the comment section.
Yep. All right. You can probably close the poll. Aruna, can you go ahead and close the poll? And we will look at the answers in a couple of minutes from now.
There are people still updating the poll.
All right. Okay.
So I'll close now. It is 1 minute, 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me know when I have to share the results.
Sure, sure. I will let you know. Certainly. Okay. All right. And on that note, we'll look at some of the results that come out later. But this is what research actually tells us, that some of the bigger challenges that HR professionals or talent management professionals actually face are more to do with, all right, and we are struggling with my slides. There we go. More to do with the access to quality talent, competition for talent, knowing where to find the skilled talent, and hiring for in-demand skills. That essentially means that some of the greater challenges that we face are in the tune of 57% on access to quality talent. Now, this is a pre-COVID era, and I'd like to share with us what's really going to happen post-COVID. Because again, coming back to what I discussed in the earlier phase, what we're looking at is a very external perspective. Can we actually turn around and look at it internal and see what matters now? So sourcing, of course, traditional ways in which we're looking at somebody who you wanted to hire would probably have to live in your locality. You would look at people who are in and around the vicinity of your office, brick and mortar office, probably even somebody who was in the country, because you realize at some point in time you would need the guy to come into your office, commute, so on and so forth. Our restrictions were based primarily on our assumptions and our belief in location. And of course, skills and everything came along with that entire package, but our sourcing was primarily done with a limited pool in that sense. Of course, traditional methods as well. How did we manage our talent at that point in time? Output-based. Again, brought on by Frederick Taylor and his belief in how we need to measure the output. Eventually, what gets measured gets honored as well, gets rewarded. We were rewarding those who showed the right amount of output. For example, sales teams. If the sales guys were able to meet their targets, they were of course receiving their bonuses. If they didn't meet the target, they didn't meet the bonus, irrespective of what happened externally, you would probably end up docking them because they didn't deserve it. It was all output based. Developing was also employer driven. You had a list of programs probably to see where you would move individuals who needed to create skills, upgrade their skills, but it was primarily driven by the strategy of the firm. Where do you see an individual lacking in skill sets? Where do you see an individual wanting to hone his skill sets to deliver to your strategy and your business goals? Employer driven, also budget driven, also time driven. March was a time when you didn't think you needed to invest in developing employees primarily because you had your goals to meet. So it was the tickers and the triggers were always different. They were always driven by the business goals of the organization, and the employee had to be at the receiving end very often of developing practices. Now, these are not hard and fast rules, but these were the general trends we observed in our research on pre-COVID. In fact, pre-COVID still very much, as I mentioned earlier, relied on scientific management principles. What are some of the trends we're going to start seeing in our post-COVID times? Now, here's what I'd like to share with you about post-COVID. Sourcing, for one, is going to change. We're not going to look at brick and mortar offices anymore. We're all working from home anyways. So sourcing is going to move into a concept called nomadic sourcing. Digital nomads, for example, are individuals who find these fabulous destinations across the whole globe, which provide great culture, great cost of living, great facilities, and are also very conducive to the kind of weathers that they have. For example, you will see Portugal emerging, Lisbon in Portugal emerging as a digital nomadic destination. Chiang Mai, Spain, Barcelona, these are places which are emerging as nomadic digital destinations. Sourcing for us is going to mean that the whole world is available for us to source from. There are so many companies that have moved into digital sourcing and have moved into digital operations where they have no brick and mortar office whatsoever. They're completely remote working. And that is possible because you're identifying the best talent across the whole globe. You're able to pay better salaries compared to the ones you would probably pay for individuals in and around your metro cities. Not just that, but if there's some work which we've all experienced now in the last couple of days can be done remotely, why not? That allows us as organizations and talent management professionals to widen our net and cast our net even wider with great talent professionals. We can look at individuals from different corners of the world. Not just that, but we can ensure we have round-the-clock operations as well. Because someone sitting in the northern hemisphere, somebody in the southern hemisphere can obviously rotate as far as our work processes are concerned. So the first theme that is emerging post-COVID, which I believe we need to consider when we're creating our talent management processes, is the nomadic locations and the sourcing of nomadic digital experts. There are many companies, and you can Google them up. In fact, some of them are called Cafe, Smash Cafe, Adventurix, Wix. Lots of companies that have moved down that track. The second theme that we're going to look at that is going to emerge post-COVID, and we need to take notice of, is our managing. If managing, for that matter, was earlier output-based, managing talent today is going to be purpose-based. Essentially, what that means is we are going to look at creating a matching of purpose of our employees and our organizations. So rather than going out there and hiring individuals who are only going to come and do a particular job role or a job specified that we have on board, what about hiring people for a match of their purpose? I think it's fair enough to say that the 45 days, 50 days lockdown that we have had, a lot of individuals have been able to go really deep dive into reflection and zero in on some of their whys and some of the questions that drive them. You will probably have come across a lot of friends of yours who've turned around and talked about so many different things they were enjoying doing at that point in time. It's a great time for us all to reflect and pause as talent management professionals on what are we using as a key trigger for hiring? What is the key vector? What is the key lens we're putting in place when we're hiring people? Are we hiring individuals for, okay, a lovely comment that's come up, why not Goa? I think Goa will soon emerge as well as a digital nomadic destination. We should put it on the map. What are we hiring for? Are we hiring for jobs or are we hiring for impact? And if we can change our conversation around purpose-based managing of talent, I think we will have a far more satisfied and inspired workforce. The 3% I mentioned earlier can become much wider and much larger. And of course, developing. If we were earlier developing by the employer-driven development plans, we're moving to an employee-centric development plans. The employee wants to learn things which he believes is going to bring value to his or her life. For example, some of us would have taken this pause in our lives to actually learn a new instrument that we would like to play. Some of us have gone back to learning some basic skills that we were missing in our lives and our careers. So many of us have taken on newfound skills to develop and realize that we have that talent within us we didn't notice earlier. For example, storytelling. For example, the ability to create, to write blogs, not just tell stories, but write blogs. So writing as a skill set. By the way, research has shown that post-COVID, the kind of skills that we're going to have to focus on include executive presence, collaboration, influencing skills, storytelling, along with the fact that we're looking at compassionate and empathetic leaders as well. So think about the kind of development programs we're going to have to bring on board and allow for employees to avail of time and again. More than that, what's going to happen is if we were in the scientific management era, we're moving to an era of out behavior. Our behavior is going to determine how our talent thrives. Our behavior in sourcing, our behavior in managing, our behavior in developing. It's a out behavior era. And moving on to our third piece on the actions we need to start taking in the out behavior era, I'd like to share with us some data here. What has been discovered in some researches is that if we can start looking at the kind of purpose that our organizations are designed with, we will probably end up having a lot more satisfied employees. Now, based on some of the research we have done and some of the reports we have referred to, almost 85% of the leaders who were surveyed recently during COVID and with reference to post-COVID have said that they are going to re-look at their purpose statement of the organization in the context of greater strategies, in the context of greater shareholder value. Not just value for their shareholders, but everybody who has a stake in the organization, in the larger community. 85% of leaders we surveyed said that. 50% of the leaders that were surveyed actually said that stakeholder outcomes mattered more than anything else. And it's not just about looking at outcomes for the business, for your profit. Entire stakeholder outcomes were going to matter. And 35% of stakeholders said that they're changing their business models itself suddenly now to involve so many larger stakeholders in the way they're designing their processes. So on this note, I'm going to our first action point out of our 3D framework, which we have set out as an action plan to deal with post-COVID talent management. And the first D is making jobs desirable. Desire is our first D. What do we need to do to make jobs desirable? Have purpose and career conversations with our existing staff and with the individuals we're going to bring on board going forward. All along, we've had conversations with individuals about where they see themselves in a couple of years from now. Where do they see themselves moving on? Where do they see they can contribute to the organization? How about having a conversation saying, how do you enjoy in the current role that you're in? Where do you see your role developing in the larger purpose of what you wish to accomplish? Where do you see you as an individual bringing impact into the lives of the organization and outside the organization? If 85% of our leaders are going to have a purpose statement and a belief in a purpose that goes beyond shareholder value, employees can too. It's going to be an environment where purpose will thrive. But if we're going to have to manage talent, we will have to recognize that purpose. Now, when we talk about purpose, there's a small story that comes to my mind. And again, apologies, because I am an avid storyteller, having brought up in a place, as I mentioned earlier. So it's my husband very often teases me that it's a disease that pokes its head up once in a while. The story brings to the concept of desire brings to mind a story of Princess of Kashi. There was a very ancient place called Kashi, which had a king and the queen, and they wanted to have an annual day. So they started interviewing a lot of troops, a lot of acting troops, to come and host a play to celebrate the annual day. Obviously, a lot of troops came from near and far away from different locations, but the queen was not happy with anybody who was playing the chief role of the Princess of Kashi. The play was about a little princess. She was not happy with any of the actors and actresses who were trying to audition for that. She had an idea, and she dressed up the young prince, who was 5 years old at that point in time, as the Princess of Kashi, and told the rest of the actors in the troupe that take him and let him play that role. He's obviously a born royal, and he will enact very beautifully. So the prince dresses up as a princess and he performs the role beautifully. It was a huge success, and of course the queen decides to call the court artist and paint the picture of this little boy dressed in the regality and the finery and create a lifelong memory of this play. The artist does just that and signs at the bottom saying Princess of Kashi, the name of the play, and he puts down the year 1900 in that year, and he leaves it. The queen takes that painting and places it in the palace walls for several years until finally it gathers dust and it's brought down and put away in a storeroom. Now, flash forward 15 years later, when the prince is about 20 years old, he's walking across the palace rooms when he stumbles upon this painting and he looks at it and he says, who is this? Princess of Kashi? I've never seen a princess here. Was there a princess in the past? Let me look clearly. So he looks at the painting and he sees this ethereal, beautiful, absolutely magical face staring back at him. And he looks at the face and he says, this princess looks like she was barely 4 or 5 years old. How do I not know her? Who is she? And he keeps thinking about that, ruminating over it for several days, visits the painting time and again, until finally he tells himself that, there's something magical about this painting and something's drawing me here. He realizes that if this is the beauty that is looking back at him when she was 4 or 5 years old, imagine how beautiful she must be now. And he falls in love with this Princess of Kashi, who he thinks is probably now 19 or 20 years old, and he wants to marry her. Eventually, of course, moping around the entire place, is disappointed. The court minister is brought on to have a conversation with him when he sits the prince down and says, Prince, what's the problem? The prince says, he points out to the painting in the room and says, I want to marry the Princess of Kashi. And the minister, who was obviously then there 15 years ago, looks at the painting and looks at the prince and looks at the painting again and says, hey, buddy, you got to sit down. And he makes him sit down and says, you know what, my dear friend, there is no princess. This is you. Tattvam asi in Sanskrit, which means thou art that. Now, what that means is if you can start finding a little piece of yourself in what you do, if you can start falling in love with your job, with your career, with your organization, with your purpose in the organization, you will fall in love with what you do and how you do it. Now, on that note, I'm going to move on to our second D, which essentially refers to designing of our jobs. Post-COVID design of jobs are going to take a big turn. Scientific management era, again, we were looking at job descriptions and hiring people based on job descriptions. So today, if somebody leaves the job and goes, attrition, we were looking at the job description, job specification, and looking at 5 more people who we could interview to do that job again. Essentially, the job may have changed, may have evolved, the external circumstances have changed, but we're still relying on the same job description, job specification for that job. Can we now, post-COVID, craft roles and role centrality, a concept brought out by a researcher called Uday Parikh, who says that individuals become more inspired and deliver even greater outcomes for the organization if they believe their role is central to the organization. So if we can create role centrality, that means every individual is able to map his or her role to the final purpose of the organization. He or she will realize that they're performing an extremely crucial role and automatically starts invigorating the individual to perform in a different fashion, in a more inspired way. Unheard of talents will emerge. Innovation will emerge because you do believe you're having an impact. Now, of course, we've recruited people with a common match in the purpose, and we're designing their roles in a way where they can deliver to that purpose. So for example, instead of hiring people who do accounting or who do bookkeeping or who are doing auditing, can we look at roles of innovators, of checkers? Can we look at roles of thinkers? Can we look at roles of the finishers who actually believe in project finishing? There's so many different roles that we can look at and then put the pieces together. Earlier on, we would have probably looked at hiring people for scale, particularly if you've got this JD, replicate it and find more and more people like tiles on a wall. Let's take a pause for a minute and think of the way we're designing our organization layout in the form of a puzzle. Now I've got the picture of a puzzle put up right there on the side. Can anyone tell me what will happen if we remove one piece from there? And I'm opening the chat box again. Quick question to all of you. What will happen if we remove one piece of the puzzle from there? What would we need to do? What will we need to do? Correct? One alternative is it will probably expand the current pieces to fill in that gap, or the puzzle would be incomplete, brings us to role centrality. Correct, Dhaval, you get a prize. Resets the puzzle, fantastic. All right, I can the gentleman who's answered this, big prize to you as well. Or for that matter, you will look at the other pieces to expand in a way where they can fill in the gap, and then find a piece that can fill in the rest of the gap. But eventually it remains incomplete. And that is the beauty of looking at creating role centrality and looking at pieces of the puzzle as our talent management techniques currently. Each jigsaw puzzle is unique, and each one of them needs to have a relationship with the organization in a unique fashion. Instead of looking at repeating our job profiles, let's look at the roles that we're crafting, hiring for. Our design has to be different. Of course, going back to the lack of brick and mortar means that we can have more and more people and more roles that we can design to contribute to the organization's purpose. And the last but not least, the third D that we're talking about, and we cannot say enough about it, is called digitization. The third D in our 3D model is digitize. What do we need to do for that? Is create more and more digital platforms. Unfortunately, work from home is not remote working only. Work from home is one methodology to work remotely, but there are so many other tools that need to become part of our daily existence for us to be truly digitized. And a great example that I have brought to share with all of you is a case study that we teach very often in our business school, that of Hire, which is a Chinese company, very innovative company. They've utilized a process which is called Ren, Dan, Hai model. And Ren, Dan, Hai means that you look at your entire organization more like a rainforest rather than an empire. And the reasoning behind this is that empires come and go and they change, but rainforests continue to survive and continue to thrive no matter what. More than that, rainforests are completely networked. They depend on each other. There's dependency, there's a strength in the ecosystem. Empires are generally pyramid-like structures, one built on top of the other. So flatten that down into a rainforest kind of structure. Ren refers to each employee, Dan refers to the needs, and of course, the Hai refers to the connection between that. So an example that Hire actually shared with the rest of the world is a case study that they developed about a problem that arose in one of their refrigerators. Now, here's how it worked, and to elaborate what I mean by digitization in its truest sense and creating a platform. Hire has created a platform which they term HOPE, H-O-P-E. That platform essentially means that every user and every employee in their organization functions like a micro enterprise, like an entrepreneur, like the CEO of his or her own business, basically dipping into the resources that have been created on a platform level. At one point in time, a couple of years ago, there was some netizen who posted that he or she had an observation about vegetables not remaining fresh in the refrigerator. Big data picked up that, highest company picked up that data, brought it back to their innovation cell, put out a post in their Hope platform asking for ideas around this, got 4 different kinds of solutions to that, picked up one solution, looked at the R&D lab, implemented that solution, brought out a prototype, and changed the nature of refrigerators once and for all. And this was done in a period of weeks. Now, what that essentially means is whatever task that we see repeating again and again in our environment can first be automated. Can we look at decluttering some of our processes to allow the truly talented individuals to dip into our existing resources even better? What this also does is that we're allowing the human mind to focus on more innovative elements and repetitive tasks which have come all the way back from the 19th century. We have a fabulous brain and a fabulous mind, and if we're allowing talent to thrive, then we must also provide the environment that can support that in different ways. There is, of course, no looking back from digitization and the digitization world that we're stepping into. It's all about technology. Platform-based digital technologies are the way forward for talent management as well. Sourcing, managing, and developing, all of them need to dip into a common pool of resources and allow for the more innovative practices and innovative interactions to come into place. On this note, I'm going to take a quick summary on what we've discussed till now. We started our discussion with looking at the whole lens of what talent management is shifting into, the definition of talent, what talent meant, what is competition, and the fact that our lens, which was always external, looking at managing talent because of the competition around it, can change if we start creating an environment and a culture in our organization where it is thriving together. We moved on to the second aspect, which was the context of talent management pre and post-COVID. Sourcing, managing, developing. Pre-COVID times, scientific management. Post-COVID, the era of out behavior. And then we looked at the actions, the 3D framework to create simple steps for us to embrace talent management in the post-COVID era, considering the different kinds of elements that are here to stay. Make the jobs desirable, have conversations on purpose and career rather than just outcome and job. Focus on looking at roles, not just on skills. So the second D, which is about design. Also about looking at larger pool of people coming on board because we don't function in a brick and mortar office anymore. And C, digitize. Automate, 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 and declutter. Provide digital solutions for all our talent pool to dip into, to allow them to become more effective in the kind of work and time that they spend their time on. On another note, there's a thought that crossed my mind and I thought I'd park it with you. I was reading a couple of days ago when I read an article that Barclays, in fact, is considering not returning back to its Canary Wharf office in the UK because they believe that whatever money that they have they're going to save on the real estate costs can be utilized into managing talent and allowing talented individuals to thrive even better. So they're looking at sourcing the best minds across the whole planet, across the whole globe, provide them even better incentives to work, and bring these individuals probably together to meet once every 2 months, once every 3 months for the personal touch, for empathy, for social connections to thrive. It doesn't mean that if you're in a digital world, you cannot have social connections and cannot meet each other face to face. In fact, that is going to be the key ingredient going forward. But they're considering doing this. And this is their way of embracing the times to come forward and looking at newer and newer ways of making their existing talent thrive. So finally, here's a thought we'd like to leave with all of you and a suggestion. Can you look at doing a 3D hackathon in your offices? That means, can you look at the concept of an orange box? Put this thought forward about 3D, the 3Ds, design, desirability, and digitization amongst your team members and your talented population of employees, and figure out newer and newer ways of actually running your business differently. Ask questions about what they can see becoming different in their own jobs and in their roles going forward. Apply the hackathon method where you invite ideas basically from several different corners, look at the top 5, 6 key ideas and hack through the process to see which are those ideas you can start implementing absolutely quickly to change the face of talent management in your organization. It'll be interesting to get this started, because whilst we can discuss about what are the various nuances of talent management as talent management professionals, there's always scope to hear from the talented individuals as well, to see what is it that can really make or change the way they see themselves in the organization. This is what a hackathon looks like. This is what it can work for. And this is a great step for us to take to start rolling our talent management practices before we start institutionalizing them. And not least, a question for all of you that I'm going to park with you as soon as I share the story with you. Whilst we're in the out behavior era, that is the era of focusing on great behavior, changing our behavior. Dronacharya was walking through Hastinapur several years ago, of course, during the time of the Mahabharata, when he stumbled across the young princes, the Pandavas and the Kauravas were playing beside a well. They were playing with a ball beside the well when the ball got flung right inside the well. Now, all of them came around the well to see if they could pull it out, but they couldn't. It was far too deep inside and they didn't know what to reach it with. Dronacharya spotted this opportunity. He said, these look like fine young men and fine young princes and archers. They're just stuck somewhere. Let me see what I can do. So he walked up to the princes and he said, I will help you bring the ball out of the well. So he takes blades of grass and he starts aiming those blades of grass into the well. They start attaching to the fine fibers of the ball and eventually end up creating a rope of sort. So each blade that he sent in was attached to the ball, and then eventually the subsequent blades attached themselves to the ends of the blades, and there was a rope that was created. And he pulled the ball out of the well and he handed it over to the princes. The princes were delighted and they said, okay, this is really unusual and we've never seen such talent before. This is something very different and we must recognize it. So they obviously drag him to the palace and they introduce him to their uncle Bhishma, and they said this is a guru. So he's interviewed at that point in time and appointed as the official guru for the Kauravas and the Pandavas. My question or my thought I would love for you all to consider is, are we looking at ourselves as a Guru Dronacharyas who can turn around and demonstrate our talent in times when needed? Or are we looking at ourselves as the princes who are waiting to spot the talent around us? Which one are we? And on that note, Aruna, back to you. It's been a lovely session today. You've been extremely interactive and very, very thought-provoking messages coming to me. I was truly obliged by some of the messages you sent to me after our earlier talk, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you once again. I'm signing off on talent management in the post-COVID era again. It's an era of out behavior. So over to you, Aruna, and of course, Ina.
Shibani, do you want me to declare the results of the poll right now?
Yes, I was going to ask you to do that as well. Please, let's see the results of the poll that we have conducted and compare them to the earlier ones. All right, okay. So we seem to fall in line with what we've discussed earlier, and we have researched through our data as well. Let me put the two screens on so we can compare. Okay, I seem to have lost it. All right, there we are. Okay, so access to quality talent. Yes, as expected, seems to be a larger one. So here's what, if we look at the fact that brick and mortar doesn't exist anymore, that essentially means that we can cast our net even wider and look at these digital destinations to look at people we can pull out from places which are not necessarily closer to us. 32% competition for talent. Of course, let's eliminate the fact that we can create cultures. Let's eliminate competition from a negative sense and refocus on the lens of competition as competitor for talent, and look at creating cultures that can allow talent to thrive in a different way and bring on more and more people there. Knowing how to find the talent, yes, and hiring for in-demand skills. Fantastic. So our poll is very much in line with what we had discussed as research. Essentially what that means is the 3D model and the 3D framework will work in the era of out behavior. Thank you, Aruna, for this lovely poll. Really appreciate it. Over to you, Ina. Aruna.
Thanks, Shibani. It was a great discussion and a lot of lovely, engaging stories from you. So if I may add some of my thoughts on talent management post-COVID era, I think companies and especially we as HR professionals really need to up our game here. You know, I mean, like you spoke about, we need to ensure that the right talent is found. We encourage employees But along with that, we have to also ensure taking care of their health, whether it's mental, physical, or financial health. And on the insurance side, I'm sure JB Boda and they will have some detailed sessions to enlighten us. But other than that, we need to also drive healthy lifestyles for our employees, focus on better work balance, meditation, exercise, all of that. On the second note, what I have realized while working in corporate, when you spoke about the nomads, the digital nomads, unfortunately in the service sector that doesn't really happen as much. So here we need to focus on how to, multi-skill our talent, so that, and decentralized decision making, like you had already mentioned, so that people are able to take decisions, they're able to multitask across
Absolutely.
different skills, right?
So from the design perspective, then look at roles and the ability for on-demand kind of functions on training programs and learning opportunities. You're right, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I was also thinking, post-COVID, we don't know about the job scenario, and a few of us have been obviously very fortunate to have this time to discover our talents and hidden talents. So I personally feel that as companies, if we cannot guarantee lifelong employment to our employees, we need to start, working on helping them to discover other skills, so that they are employable and they have something to look forward to, even in a scenario where there's no jobs around.
Absolutely. The purpose conversations, desirability,
Right.
purpose around, yes, purpose around your your career and around what your purpose means for for the others. Absolutely right.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if we get into the society obligations and environment, that's like an entire whole gamut to cover there on the post-COVID talent management as well. So I here there are some observations and some interesting queries that had come up while you were speaking. Shovik had mentioned Peter Drucker. So Peter Drucker did talk about similar things, decentralizing, and about the fall of the fall of the blue collar employees. And so he focused a lot on simplification, keeping that companies are producing too many products which people don't want. So in line with your minimalistic view, maybe this is something we need to refocus on, and this is a realization that is coming up in COVID, that we don't need so much stuff. We're fueling an economy with things that we don't require, but we need to change that focus. So Peter Drucker is quite a pioneer in that. And we have a message from Sanjeev for you. He says, "Hi Shibani, in your presentation you showed," okay, that's on the Olympics. Any other, so while I check for other questions, I just wanted, I wanted your thoughts actually on the gig workforce. I mean, while we have the digital nomads, looking at the gig workforce, what are your thoughts? Do you think it's going to be something that's going to take off, or
absolutely,
how do we manage something like that? That's going to be a big challenge, a big thing that will come up with HR now. So.
Can you repeat your question? Sorry, I lost the sound in between.
Sure. I was saying about the gig workforce. That's going to be a different kind of challenge to deal with. So, any thoughts around how that's going to shape up post COVID?
So, are you referring
that? Yeah, sorry.
So, are you referring to moonlighters, the individuals who are offering their contractual workforce, the ability to hire? Yes. So, you look at doing so moonlighters, as I think. People my age refer to them as. Yes, you're right. So it's note here that let's look at the concept of gardening. When we look at talent management also. So gardening is the ability to keep watering the right plants in the right areas and at the right circumstances with the right kind of ingredients for allowing them to thrive. If we can look at talent management also in the context of gardening, it automatically tells us that we're going to give the right amount and the right dosage of sunlight and water to the right plant at the right age at the right time. Now, if there are certain jobs that can be done through moonlighting, I think it's fantastic because moonlighters are also eventually intelligent nomads who are looking at pursuing not just their work, but also their passion. And they find a fabulous balance between the two. The other observation I have over here is, honestly speaking, the research that's been done by Nicholas Bloom in 2017, a Stanford professor, and the research done by Airtasker also, which is another HR company. Both these research say that individuals who are able to work from the comfort of their location or their residence or their choice of destination outperform all the others who go to the brick and mortar 9 to 5 employee kind of contractual roles, close to 16.8 days more average contribution than a full-fledged full-time employee. They take 50% fewer leaves, and they're also taking fewer and shorter breaks. In short, moonlighters in the gig population actually works more than the one in the office.
They do, but I was reading another article around the challenges with that, because these guys then do not have, like how we as fixed, I mean, I am a permanent employee, then there's the insurance covers, medical covers, those kind of things. Then these guys need to be educated around, and, they have to pay attention on that as well. The stability, right? So thank you so much.
Over to you. Thank you so much, Ina. Over to you, Aruna. Any final words, and then we can.
So there's one last question on a lighter note. Somebody asked on the nomadic way of life, why Goa can't be an option?
Of course, it can be an option. Are you looking at moving there? We will be happy to work with you, Aruna.
So thank you, Shibani. Thank you, Ina. Thank you so much for bringing the serious thought in a very lighter way and putting the stories across around it, and conveying the message in terms of how to construct the 3Ds. I'm sure there are many HR partners who have signed in today from different industries, and they have taken the notes of the 3D, the way you've asked them to construct it. And I would like Mr. Gautam Boda to invite to say, convey the vote of thanks to you, and I will circle back to you for the closing comments.
Thank you, Aruna. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of J B Boda Group and the participants, I thank Dr. Belwalkar, Speaker of the Day, for all the valuable information she has shared with us today on managing talent in the post-COVID world. I also extend thanks to our panelist, Ms. Ina D'Souza, for her willingness and involvement in today's event. We are totally humbled and gracious to see our webinar series being appreciated by you all. That motivates us to organize more such interactive events. And we sincerely request all of you to like our post on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. That will encourage all of us at J B Boda and our speakers to great extent. We sincerely look forward to your support. Please do join us again on 8th May 2020 to listen to Dr. Belwalkar giving insight on unlearn or relearn talent post-COVID. And I'm confident, like today's, this will be another very interesting topic for all the HR fraternities. Once again, thank you, each one of you, for joining us, and continue to stay safe. Thank you.
Shibani, just want to have a closing comment from your side.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Boda. I'm really grateful for this time and this opportunity. It's a wonderful audience as always. It's been an honor, a privilege, and I'm looking forward to subsequent sessions. A couple of viewers had written out to me a few days ago asking for the mention of certain books and what is it that I can recommend as reading. Well, in this context in particular, there are two books which I think are fairly seminal and can change our perspective of looking at talent management. One of them is, of course, a book which is called Our Iceberg is Melting by Kotler. And the other book that I recommend for all our viewers is a book called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. Both of them have spoken about the open learning organization, and both of them focus on concepts of how we need to look at learning. We need to look at talent management and developing talent in the context of a more open network system, like an organism, which needs the different parts of its body to actually thrive and to survive and to function. So these are two books that I could recommend as good reading. Look forward to meeting all of you again. This is Shibani Belwalkar from Theory of Purpose. We'll be happy to take any messages. You can drop us a line on our website or visit shibanibelwalkar.com, which is the alternative website. And hope to see you some point in time if you ever choose to enroll at NMIMS as well. Thank you, Aruna. Thank you, Ina, as well. Thank you, Mr. Boda. Good evening.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Shibani. So there's a request. The people are asking to put the book names in the chat section for their reference. So in case we miss putting in the chat section, we will put this on our social media handles. You can find those book names over there. Thank you so much once again, and see you all on the 8th. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.